Greece's problems may seem foreign to us, but are there more parallels between the U.S. and Greece than one might think? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for Front Page.
After its adoption of the euro in 2001, Greece took advantage of unusually low interest rates to borrow massive sums of money, funding unsustainable entitlement programs and mortgaging its economic future. Keep in mind, this was a crisis everyone knew was coming. Greece's political leaders accumulated debt they knew they could not pay back to pay for promises they knew they could not keep. Sound familiar? For years, Greece sped down the road to serfdom, ignoring the warning signs of history and economics. Now we are right behind them, blowing past the same warnings, speeding toward the same fate.
All right, joining me in studio, Yaron Brook, president of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Daily, right?
Yes,
not dairy.
Daily. Yeah, we got out of the dairy
Investors
business.
Dairy was a really lame business model. It went out of business a long time ago. All right. So is Destined overselling here in terms of a likelihood of you keep on hearing like the U.S. is not Greece. The politicians are like, we're not Greece. Are we or are we not?
Not yet. But we're on our way. 100% of GDP is our debt to ratio, and theirs is 160%. So they're still beating us a bit, but we're on our way. I mean, the way we're accumulating debt, $1 trillion and a half a year, we're going to be there. And every, that lead-in, you could have put in there either U.S. or you could have put U.S. homeowners because we did the same thing in our personal lives in the housing market.
After 2001, low interest rates, accumulating debt to pay for things you can't afford. Yeah. Yaron, any?
Well, I just want to point out that I think people who complain about where we're heading, all those people who voted for doubling, tripling government spending under Bush should be banned from having ads like this. Because when he talks about that 2001 crisis and spending money and all that, that's him. That's the men voted for that stuff. It's Republicans in the House and Senate voted for that stuff. We need a clean plate in this country, which means we need to get away from blaming Bush, Obama. We need to admit that both our political parties were horrific during the 2000s and for the last 50, 60 years. And we need a real plan forward rather than just playing this, Obama's going to spend out of control. Well, what did McCain would have done? Exactly the same thing. What did Bush do? Exactly the same thing.
Yeah, Terry, and what is it that's happening right now that this 50 or 60 years of post-World War II sort of model of Western European socialism, high taxes, high unemployment, but all these services, why is it at this point suddenly seeming like the dominoes are falling? Because as we're taping this, the markets are going crazy about Italy.
Yeah,
and they're the next one possibly to have a major crisis. What's happening now? What precipitated all this?
Well, the bills are coming due, and what has happened is we've had a dramatic slowdown in economic growth across the Western world, and we no longer supply the output and the revenues needed to cover our spending. So we're just building debts really quickly, and those debts, by the way, are coming out of the pockets of the next generation.
And look, part of this is that the bond market woke up. For a very long time, investors, and these could be banks, they could be other countries, they could be private individuals, were buying up country debt without taking into account leverage ratios, right? We know for personally that if you take out too much debt, you're in trouble. We know for businesses that's true. We're learning in this country that it was true for banks and so on. And now we're getting educated, and the fact is that the markets are saying, wait a minute to Greece, you keep borrowing this money, how are you ever going to pay it back? So they're pricing it, and all that we're seeing right now, nobody's defaulted. All we're seeing is the market is pricing the debt with a greater probability that they won't be able to pay it back.
And that's that interest rate on the. That's when they say the spreads, and when they're talking about the.
And the spread is Germany. Everybody assumes will always pay its debt. I think a pretty optimistic assumption. Greece, so it can borrow at 1.5%. Greece, they're saying they're probably going to get only 50%, so they're priced to get 20, 30%. Italy now broke through what everybody considered was this important level of 7%, and it's paying 7.5%, which means the probability that people will not get their money back because they're overextended has increased dramatically.
So now a recent Heritage report says that the U.S. is on track to attain these European levels of debt in the coming decade. So what is it, Terry, that, clearly we've been talking about this again and again, what we need to do. How do we get politicians to wake up and realize that they can't continue this? Because whenever you talk about massive reductions in spending, and only Ron Paul is the one who's saying, I'm going to cut $1 trillion in the first year, which may or may not even be possible, even if you were to win the presidency, which is unlikely. What are we going to do to get people to realize that you can't sustain this? I mean, it seems as though we're now kind of willing to talk about entitlements. Yeah. So you go like, okay, they're willing to talk about it, which they weren't willing to do recently.
Yeah, so. It's a massive educational project that has to be done. I mean, look, most people don't understand this stuff. They've ignored it for a long time because they kept hearing, well, we're headed towards fiscal Armageddon, and there's nothing that can be done about it. But if we stop spending now, we can. But nobody thought, well, it's not really going to happen. It's not a real problem. We can postpone it somehow. Well, it's here. Mm-hmm. We no longer cover our Social Security bill. Okay, mm-hmm. Medicare is growing so rapidly that we will be bankrupted within 15 or 20 years. It has to be addressed. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't, we will be Greece.
All right, I want to move on. You're on because Chuck Schumer weighed in, and Chuck Schumer is a noted economist and a real fiscal hawk. Weighed in on the super committee in Congress, which is charged with U.S. deficit reduction. Let's see what he had to say.
But the problem on the other side, when they say close loopholes, they say we want no net revenues. I don't think the super committee is going to succeed because our Republican colleagues have said no net revenues.
All right, 30 seconds each. What do you think on this super committee and this revenue problem? Is it a revenue problem, or what do you think they're going to have to do to get something?
No, it's a spending problem. As I said before, 2007 to now, 40% increase in spending. It's entirely a spending problem. And by the way, the Republicans offered $300 billion in additional revenues over the next 10 years, and Democrats rejected it.
And they want to do it through tax reform, though, not through rate increases.
Not through a rate increase.
Clearly a spending problem. This is a problem of unlimited government, a government getting into stuff that it should never have gotten into. What you need is massive shrinkage of spending. And there are only two ways that happens. Now, voluntarily, we think about how to restructure it, or when the bond market prices U.S. bonds at 15% and we're basically approaching default, and then you get the kind of austerity that Greece is looking at, and it's much, much uglier. It would be ugly to cut spending now, but at least, we'd get over it. If we wait, it gets very ugly, and that's where you get riots in the streets and real social unrest.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for your on. And Terry, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.